First tonight, as you might have heard, lecturers in Nigeria's public universities have suspended their strike, which began 8 months ago. They were demanding better funding for universities, more facilities, and an improved pay system, among other issues. Several rounds of talks with the government had failed to resolve the dispute. Well, last month, a court ordered the lecturers to end the strike, but their union appealed against the decision. However, in the early hours of this Friday morning, that union, known as ASUU, announced the suspension of the strike. The conditions of the suspension are still not entirely clear, but the union has now asked its members to resume work from Monday next week. So what should we make of all that? Well, for their personal perspectives on that and all the other developments that we'll be covering on the program today, I'm joined now by our eminent panel, the public affairs analyst and former presidential election spokesman for the People's Democratic Party, or PDP, Kasim Afebuwa, the journalist, policy strategist and Arise News analyst, Waziri Adio, and Arise Judiciary editor and deputy director of news, Toby Soniyi. And later, we'll also be joined by Arise News analyst and former chairman of the editorial board of Daily Trust newspaper, Mahmood Jega. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So let me come to you, Kasim Afebuwa. Thank you very much for coming in. As one student put it, that's 8 months wasted out of my life, unquote. Hundreds of thousands of other students left angry and frustrated. What, in your assessment, has this strike achieved?
That's a very dicey question. When you say, what did the strike achieve? I think the ASUU strike, has once again put the country and its readiness to improve on education to serious questioning. 8 months out of the life of tertiary education and the life of a nation that is still working on tentacles like Nigeria is no joke. But again, I expect that the ASUU strike will provide a veritable platform for both government and ASUU members to critically look into the issues of university education on the one hand, and also the issue of infrastructure and funding. Because along the line of this strike, you had commentaries like schools or universities generating their own income and they are not accounting for it. I saw one public hearing or public interrogation in the National Assembly where a school was earning so much and only repatriating maybe 30 million naira into the coffers of government and all of that. I think this ASUU strike and government must be able to look into the funding of university education. If federal government is not able to meet up with this responsibility of doing that, internally generated revenue, they have to also put a greater watch into the operations of vice chancellors and what have you, both polytechnics, colleges of education, and the university system. But it is not cherry news, Charles, that in the 21st century you keep your students home for 8 months. But again, that's what we have to contend with for now. Thank God that they have announced that they are resuming on Monday. That's cherry news. Just like you said in your intro, we hope that another strike will not come, come on stream again. But for God's sake, we must take issues of education very seriously.
Absolutely, 100% in agreement with that. And Waziri Adio, this was the 9th ASUU strike in 13 years. Clearly a long-running saga with the government about funding tertiary education in this country, as Kasim Afebuwa was saying. And it seems that that key question remains unresolved.
Definitely. This strike was for 8 months. An academic year is like 9 months. 9 months actually. So that's the whole year almost wasted. ASUU says that it's not like that. They will go back. The academic session will continue and all of that. It's good that they are going back. It's good that the students will go back and they can pick up the pieces all over again. But this is, like Kasim said, I think it should help to put the spotlight on the state of tertiary education in Nigeria. I don't think we did that with this strike, because what you see basically is more or less like work avoidance. If you follow the discussion, whether from the side of government or from the side of ASUU or even from civil society, we were dancing around the issues. The real issue is about how do you run your tertiary education in the 21st century. How do you fund it? The fact that universities are owned by government does not mean government alone should fund it. But what do we have? Look at the way in which we're funding universities now. It's totally dysfunctional. It's not primed to deliver quality education. When you look at the budget of most of these schools, you find out that what we are funding actually is the salaries of lecturers, right? You look at the budget about by the way, the lecturers are earning peanuts, right? The highest paid professor is earning under 500,000 naira per month. What can you do with that as a professor? That's the peak that you can get to. They are not earning enough, and the funding structure is so skewed towards salaries. So you don't have anything left, for the infrastructure, both for infrastructure for teaching and also, for the welfare of the student. So what we need to be focusing on is how do we expand the funding pool to make sure that we're able to have enough funding, for the running of our universities, especially the public universities. If you look at the statistics, the ones owned by the federal government account for 66% of the carrying capacity, right? Yes, you have private universities, but the private universities, despite that they are almost in the majority now, they account for only 6%. So if you combine the federal government university with the state universities, they account for 94% of the undergraduates enrolled in Nigeria. So we cannot. This is something we need to pay attention to. So what do we need to do? We need to be focusing on how do we expand the funding pool. The government needs to do more, but this fixation that because government owns it, government alone has to fund it, is not reasonable. The students and the parents, and when you look at it, most of these people actually went to fee-paying primary schools, fee-paying secondary schools. Where's this idea that it's tertiary education that should be free? Where do you bring in the private sector? Where do you bring in the alumni, the alums of the schools? Where do you bring the foundations? Where do you bring the internally generated revenue? So the idea that federal universities should be tuition free is totally wrong. So we need to look at that. Then it's not just about funding, it also goes beyond funding. The way you also run these institutions, if universities need autonomy, give them autonomy. This idea that federal government is the employer of everybody. And when you start talking about the kind of software you use to pay, this is the only situation where you have employees telling their employer, what application they should use to pay them. So I think this is we have a crisis of public education in Nigeria. We cannot develop as a country because if we do not, have people who are well trained, and all of that. So you want to say, you don't want to waste a crisis, right. But I'm not too sure we didn't waste this crisis.
Yeah, that's a good point. And let me bring you in, Toby Soniyi. You are, of course, a Riser Judiciary editor. You're the legal eagle on the steam, and you're also the deputy director of news here in Abuja. Looking at it from a legal point of view, if the major sticking points in negotiations, such as the method of paying lecturers, is unresolved or not completely resolved, does that raise concerns that another strike may not be far off, or is that taken care of legally by that court order?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Well, the lecturer, they carefully shows their work. They didn't call off the strike, they suspended it. And when you suspend something, it's easier to resume that action. So people should take note of the word they use while saying they are resuming. They said, we are suspending, we are not calling it off. So that basically sets the tone of what to expect. The issues have not been resolved. The payment system has not been resolved. I think, in my view, they were boxed into a corner. I mean, I'm talking of ASUU. The National Industrial Court order boxed them into a corner, so they need some faith-saving approach to return to school, and they have no choice, really. So for me, I must also make it clear that, look, the solution is not in the court. The judiciary is not in a position to settle this matter. Because it's like, even this one that ASUU is going back, it's like they are being forced to go back. It's not their intention to go back. And you know, when you force someone to do something, he's not going to do it the way it should be done. So they are going back grudgingly. And the service delivery isn't going to be something to write home about, because the issue basically remain outstanding. I'm not sure a single issue has been resolved. The no work, no pay position has not been made clearer. Were they going to be paid for the 8 months they did not work? If President Buhari said, no, I'm not going to pay, what happened? They will still have to comply with the court order. But complying with the court order and losing the 8 months salary, you can think about the attitude to work. You can think about what you expect from them. So I'm not sure a single issue was resolved. Like I said, the judiciary is not in a position to resolve this matter. And like every other speaker has said too, it was an opportunity for us to sit down and discuss. It's for government to even know that, look, I alone cannot solve, I can't fund this thing. So let us sit down. As you guys are experts, come together, give us, suggestions. How do we, given our peculiar situation in Nigeria, how do we fund university educational system? If we have done that, I'm sure we'll have learned something. But if the government is thinking that the judiciary is going to help it to get out of this problem, I think the government is being short-sighted. The court is not going to resolve it.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a good point. And just to mention that President Buhari actually made that same point that you're making. He said that there's got to be new ways found of funding tertiary education in this country. And of course, for the students, I mean, they've missed a full session of academic work after COVID disrupted another session. So 2 years essentially gone. But stay with us, gentlemen, because I'd like to get your analysis of another big story of the week. On Thursday, an appeals court dropped terrorism and treason charges against the separatist leader Nnamdi Kanu, whose group known as IPOB is agitating for a breakaway state in the southeast of Nigeria. The court in Abuja ruled that a lower court, where the trial started, had no jurisdiction to try him. The court also said his extradition was illegal because the proper procedure had not been followed. The ruling by a panel of 3 judges was seen as a major blow to the Nigerian authorities. But just as Mr. Kanu's supporters were starting to celebrate in anticipation of his release from detention, the government announced that it would pursue the case further against Mr. Kanu, saying he was only discharged but not acquitted. This seems to suggest that the separatist leader might not be released anytime soon. And our eminent panel of analysts is still with me. I thank all of you exceedingly for staying with us. I'll come to you in a minute, Kasim Afebua, but let me return to you, Toby Soniyi, because you are again our legal expert on the panel. What's the difference between saying that someone is discharged and acquitted, which is what the government is saying, that's what's happened with Nnamdi Kanu?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. What it means is that he has not been tried formally. You know, there is this theory of double jeopardy, that if you have been tried for an offense, you cannot be tried for it again. So to be discharged and acquitted, you must have gone through the trial. The government will have called witnesses. You open your defense, the defendant to call his own witnesses, and the judge would deliver a judgment on merit. But having not done that, the trial hasn't started at all. So what has happened is that he has pleaded not guilty to the charges. Before the trial judge could go into the merit of the case, his lawyer brought an application challenging the jurisdiction of the court. So what it means is that he can still be tried for all those charges. Since he was merely discharged and not acquitted, all those charges remain live charges, but for him to face those charges, government will have to release him, probably return him to the UK, request for him formally from the UK authority. If he's released to them, he can face the charges. The High Court will have jurisdiction. But now that he was illegally brought into the country, he cannot be charged. He can't be charged for the, offenses. So the difference between acquittal and discharge is that you must have gone through the whole log of the trial. And at the end of the day, whether you are found guilty or not, it is then that you can talk of...
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed for clarifying that point. So let me come to you, Kasim Afebu. The government's case against Nnamdi Kanu effectively shattered on Thursday when the Federal Court of Appeal in Abuja dismissed that charge, or those charges against him. But the Attorney General says he'll press ahead with the case, and that's the next line of action. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think from day one, I think government missed the point of exploring and exploiting the opportunity of dialogue. Under a democracy, it's expected that you carry out constructive dialogue, constructive engagement, collective bargaining, in the interest of keeping the union, sane. But when Nnamdi Kanu started his agitation and all of that, I think the government's own attitude towards that was not something that was sharing news to some of us. What you ought to have done as a government was to bring this man on a round table. You discuss the issues. If you want Nigeria to remain as one, as a united country, let's discuss the issues. What are the worries of Nnamdi Kanu? What is he talking about? Is there merit in them? If there is merit in them, then you sit on a round table. And as a government, you have access to more than 1,001 information that you can use to, knock him off in terms of his own grounds. But they didn't do that. So the whole agitation took the shape of violence, killings, and what have you, and now putting the country on tenterhooks, so to speak. So the young man escaped the country, and over there, still making pronouncements on radio, this, radio, that, releasing press statements and all that. Don't forget that ab initio, they say he jumped bail. For which Senator Iyinaya Baribe stood for him. They say he jumped bail and all that. Because of that, they had to, in a Gestapo manner, bring him back to the country, which the court has said that rendition wasn't proper, that is like an act of terrorism on the part of Kanu. But again, my position is very simple. You see, Nnamdi Kanu is a Nigerian, so to speak, and so far, on records, he's a Nigerian. He's also a British citizen, so he enjoys dual nationality. But because he's a Nigerian, we can assess him on the face values, sit down with him, discuss these issues. Because when you look at the way and manner that the Southeast economy has been shattered as a consequence of this agitation and all of that, sit at home order and what have you, killings, it doesn't help anybody, both the side of government and the side of the people. So we should explore, very maximally the opportunity and the resource of dialogue. Dialogue is very essential in a democracy. And the moment the president granted interview, I think, to Arise, and he was saying a dot in a circle and all that, that also put some kind of slaw, on the whole intention of government, to reach out to this young man. Because when there is crisis, you need to solve that. Even when you fight war, you still go back on a round table to resolve, and arrive at certain resolutions. The Ukraine and Russia invasion and all have you, they are still going to settle all of that on the round table. So instead of doing that, government is just chasing shadow and, you know, making itself look as if it's not prepared, not tidy enough to handle this case. And with this court pronouncement on verdict, kind of, it has also shattered, you know, the position of government. So if you say you want to now, just like Toby said, you want to now charge him on that because he's not been acquitted, then it is now going to be seen as if it's like a witch hunt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let me bring in Waziri Adio there, because in spite of the fact, Waziri, that the government is pressing ahead with this case, how significant would you say this ruling by the appeal court is, especially for the supporters of Nnamdi Kanu who feel that he's been treated unfairly? Is there a sense of victory and that they've essentially won the battle?
Well, it's still a continuous saga. It's difficult to say. Don't forget that the appeal court is the court of second instance. There's still the Supreme Court. We don't know whether that's an option that the federal government wants to take. And there's a reason why the judiciary exists, and it's, you know, is to settle disputes. The federal government thinks that he has a claim. Nnamdi Kanu and his lawyers and his supporters, you know, think otherwise, and you have the judiciary to educate on that, you know. So let's see how that goes.
Okay.
The other way to also look at it is that, you know, there's the legal part, there's also the political part. And I think
the political part has been ignored.
It also goes beyond the federal government and Nnamdi Kanu itself. You know, at some point, other stakeholders also need to come in. I think that is very, very important.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. For the moment, do stay with us, Waziri and Kasim. And Toby, I want to thank you very much indeed. Toby Soniyi is Arise Judiciary editor and is also, of course, Deputy Director of News for Abuja. He's got other things to do, so thank you very much indeed for joining us. And we will, of course, be joined in a moment by Mahmood Jega. You're watching Arise Prime Time. Plenty more still ahead as we continue to reflect on the big events of the week. Next, we turn to politics and the 2023 ballot. Stay with us. Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Now let's assess the spark that's charging Nigeria's election campaign as the people ask why things are the way they are, and we wonder what if and what next for this country politically. As we ponder whether 2023 is a tipping point, many are hoping that the ballot will deliver a new messiah to solve the country's many problems and signal the end of bad governance. But for this to happen, the parties will first have to get past their internal squabbles, the stalled negotiations to resolve those internecine battles, and the possibility of losing the next presidential election if they don't. In the midst of all that, the electorate is losing out once again because of the late starts to campaigning and canvassing, and voters don't appear yet to be getting a sense of the kinds of policies the candidates will be pushing out if they win. Well, here with me to unpack all that are our panelists, the public affairs analyst and former presidential election spokesman for the People's Democratic Party, or PDP, Kasim Afebua, the journalist, policy strategist and Arise News analyst, Waziri Adio, and we're also joined now by Arise News analyst and former chairman of the editorial board of Daily Trust newspaper, Mahmood Jega. And Mahmood, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and of course Kasim and Waziri for staying with us. And let me come to you first, Mahmood, because you've been sort of rather patient with us. What's your sense of where things are now with this continuing crisis in the PDP?
Well, the PDP, the opposition party, has so far been unable to resolve the crisis emanating from its choice, in particular of presidential running mate, which has led to virtual rebellion by an important section of the party led by the governor of Rivers State, Governor Soniyi, supported by another 4 or 5 governors. And their insistence that the party chairman must resign, which he is not apparently ready to do, and he has the support of the party's National Executive Committee. And they have been unable to resolve it and went ahead and started campaigning without resolving that matter. Well, it is not clear what Governor Wike and his colleagues will do in the long run, because the problem that they have is that even though they have this serious dispute with the party's presidential ticket, they are also sponsoring gubernatorial and legislative candidates on PDP's tickets in their various states. And some of them are in a very precarious position. I'm thinking, for example, of the governor of Oyo State, Makinde, who is part of the Wike group rebellion. He is already in a very dangerous position because he is a PDP governor in Oyo State seeking a second term. And personally, I think it will be very difficult to stop the APC candidate Tinubu from winning Oyo State in the presidential election. And unless Governor Makinde gets his act together, 2 weeks after that, he might also actually lose the gubernatorial election. So they are also standing on shaky grounds, and possibly in the end they may find accommodation with the PDP presidential candidate, maybe. Otherwise, they are really heading for disaster.
Well, yes, let's hear what Kasim Afebuwa has to say about that, because, of course, he was until recently a member of the People's Democratic Party. What do you make of the crisis, Mr. Afebuwa? It's been termed the Wike debacle. I mean, how damaging is that for the party, and how do you think they're going to solve that issue?
Well, thank you very much. I think the more the crisis, the better for me, because I keep telling people, you can't build nothing on something on nothing. And you cannot carry out injustice and you expect to reap justice. The PDP from day one, prior to the primaries, the presidential primaries, were working from answer to questions with a chairman that one had expected would live above board. But the moment the chairman became so partisanly involved in the process that produced Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, I knew that they were headed for the rocks. I had told them clearly before then that within the PDP structure, with the provisions of the Constitution, it was just natural for the party to cede its presidential ticket to the southern part of the country. There is no doubt about that because it's a provision of the Constitution. And the beneficiary of the flag bearer of the party now had spoken vehemently against the issue of in support of zoning in previous elections and primaries, to the point that he had to leave the PDP in 2012 to join the APC to defeat PDP in 2015. And in 2015, prior to the presidential election, he has said that PDP was beyond redemption. I'm talking about Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. Now he left the APC because he couldn't get his act together, came back to PDP, and because of the organic nature of PDP, they accepted him. In 2018, emerged as a candidate in Port Harcourt. So one would have expected that a man of his stature, having been a vice president, should naturally be the one leading the charge for an equitable distribution of power, and is crazy aphrodisiac. Whether you like it or not, in a plural society like Nigeria, you need to balance the algorithms of power. You need to balance all these sentiments, centripetal and centrifugal forces, so that in the final analysis, there will be some level of stability and internal cohesion for us to move forward as a nation. But when you feel that you are more important than the party, and you have a party chairman, Yocha Ayu, who went to visit the man who stepped down, the governor of Sokoto, to say, oh, you are the hero. When you see a chairman saying you are the hero of the convention, then it means that ab initio he wasn't fair, and he was supposed to be a fair man in the entire contest. So I have predicted this, that the PDP will go into crisis. The crisis is happening. I'm happy about it. I'm still praying and fasting. I want the crisis to continue so that southern Nigeria can produce president. And that is why I see the APC governors. They are my heroes. When these sentiments and politics was playing out, 14 of them rose from a meeting and wrote a position that, no, Mr. President, please allow us to cede the ticket of the party to southern Nigeria. And that position they took doused the tension within the APC. That's why you see, to a large extent today, they have a candidate from the south that they are all supporting to win the presidency. So we don't have to say it's all about us all the time.
Right.
You know, perennial candidates and all of that, and contestants in this contest should not be what should drive national politics and development.
Right, okay, and I was laughing there, not laughing at the PDP, but laughing at the way that Kasim Afebua was describing it, because obviously we don't take sides ourselves here on Arise News. But let me come to you, Waziri Adio. Is it your sense that reconciliation negotiations are stalling and the Wike group may now simply walk away? I mean, while the Atiku Presidential Council simply forges ahead with the campaign, regardless of the damage that's been done.
Well, you know, it's always said that politics is the art of the possible. Yes, there's the way it is now, but I have no doubt that eventually they're going to come to an agreement. And like I said in one of these sessions that we had before, the presidential candidate of PDP will have to decide, you know, whether he wants this to continue like this, whether he's ready to call the bluff of, you know, those people who are with Wike and the rest of them. And, you know, the reason why this is very important is that it's not just Wike alone. You have Wike and some other governors with him. They also have their own dilemma in the sense that they have candidates that they are feeding. Some of them are also like, you know, Malam Jega said, you know, Makinde is also running in Oyo State. But I think at some point they will reach an accommodation. And I think the way that accommodation will come, I think they have gone beyond the issue of how Atiku emerged. Right? They've taken that as a fait accompli. The candidate is the candidate. Where the argument is now is that the party, the candidate of the party and the chairman of the party should not be from the same section of the country. So, you know, so the issue now is around the chairman of the party. They are not saying the candidate should step down. They are not saying even the running mate of the candidate should step down. What they are talking about is the chair of the party. So at some point, I think Alhaji Atiku Abubakar will have to decide: Can I call the bluff of these guys? Can I ask 5 to 7 governors, you know, to just take a walk and deal with whatever is left? Especially for certain reasons, I think he's going to make that call. And he's going to make that call because, one, this is about the last chance for him. In November, he will be 76. Right? If he doesn't win now, he can't run again. You can't come when you are 80 to say you want to run. You can only do that if you are an incumbent. That is the first thing. The second thing is that the South actually is the stronghold of PDP for now. PDP has 13 governors. 7 to 8 of them are from the South, right? Yes. And, you know, so 8 of them from the South. And you have some significant states like Rivers, you know, and others. So I think, like I said the other time, eventually they have to do the cost-benefit analysis, and you will have to settle for, I think it might settle for, I need these people more than I need the chairman. I think they will find a nice way to ask him to, you know, no, I'm not advising. I'm just saying, I mean, you know, this is politics. Yeah, you know, okay. You have to say, you know.
No. I think that there is. You make a very good point, Waziri, when you talk about that cost-benefit analysis. And let me bring in Mahmood Jega, because the question, Mahmood, has been raised. I mean, Iyochia Ayu can simply resign, can't he? I mean, the interest of the party should be bigger than the interest of the man himself, especially when there is a risk of losing the next election. You know, I mean, River State is the biggest voting, if you like, constituency in the South. You don't want to risk losing that. I mean, what are your thoughts on the possibility or the wisdom behind Iyorchia? Are you saying, yes, I'll sacrifice for the greater good of the party, and perhaps if we win, give me a big fat reward after that?
Well, that is true. You know, with politicians, you sometimes never know. The biggest argument that the Wike group has against ASUU was that he actually promised that if someone from the north emerged as the presidential candidate of PDP, then he will resign. That's what they said he said. And he seems to be saying, he is not saying when a northerner emerges as presidential candidate, but if the person gets elected as president, then he will resign. Possibly then he could now be made a minister or something of the sort. However, right now the stakes are very, very big, and one would have thought that, okay, if, as Governor Wike said even yesterday, that the only stumbling block to a reconciliation within the party so that they can approach the election in a united manner is for the chairman to resign and to be replaced by someone from the south, then one would have thought that really Dr. Iyorchia ASUU could make the sacrifice and resign at this stage. The only problem I foresee, and possibly that is why the presidential candidate himself is not lending his weight to that suggestion, is that the problem might actually not end there. Because if Dr. Iyorchia ASUU resigns, there will still be the question of who will replace him. And possibly the Wike group may insist that they will produce the person who will replace him, and that might not be palatable to Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, which is why he is not going in that direction. Otherwise, as we said, from our point of view, as observers from outside, we would have said, yeah, but Dr. ASUU should make the sacrifice and resign if that will resolve the issue. Even the governor of his home state, Governor Autumn of Benue, seems to support the suggestion. I thought initially that he might not support it. He might want somebody from his own state as party chairman. But from his body language and many statements he has made recently, he is with the Wike group in demanding that Dr. ASUU should keep his promise and resign. So that is the quickest route. But even if he does not resign, possibly the Wike group will have to find some accommodation with the presidential candidate, as we said, for the practical reason that they are still deeply entrenched in PDP and are supporting gubernatorial and legislative candidates in other elections. And in the case of the governor of Oyo State, he himself is a candidate in the gubernatorial election, so he cannot afford a fractured appearance.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Let me move slightly away from the Wike issue and come to you, Kasim Afebua, because obviously you're no longer a member of the PDP, so you're not in any way bound to support the presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar. In that context, which of the presidential candidates do you think is most likely to really shake things up positively in Nigeria if he wins? Are you supporting any of them?
Yes, I have made my position known clearly when I resigned from the party. I am going to support, or I am supporting Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I have analyzed the two candidates from the south. There's two viable candidates from the south, a Peter Obi and a Tinubu. And they have come to the irrevocable conclusion that with Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, with the APC having 21 governors, and with the kind of network he has across the country, he might be in a better position to help unite this country and build internal cohesion He has an activist background. He's very conversant with the issues of nation building. He has had Lagos State as a governor before. He worked so much that even his line of succession has continued to live on the kind of policy and programs that he enunciated when he was a governor. So for me, I'm a Tinubu supporter. I'm not a member of APC, and I repeat that one because people are saying you are jumping from party to party. I'm tired of partisan politics. I'm just supporting Tinubu so that my vote, just my one vote, and those of my supporters in my little village of Okbela can go for the APC candidate.
Okay, well, thanks for making that ineluctably clear. And let me come to you, Waziri Adio. We're looking at all the parties now. The campaigns have actually begun. You're a number cruncher. You're an issue assessor. What sense do you get of the kinds of policies the front-runner parties will be pushing out if they win? I mean, or are we still in the dark about that?
I think we're still largely in the dark. Yeah, two candidates have their policy documents out. The Labour Party candidate, Mr. Peter Obi, and the PDP candidate, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. I've not seen the one for the APC. But even for the two of them, a policy document is a document. We need them to start speaking about what they want to do. We need to see the details. We need to see the numbers, right? So it's not just enough to say, I'm going to double the GDP. What exactly are you going to do and how? It's not just enough to say, you know, I'm going to create X number of jobs. So how are you going to do that? So we need to, unfortunately, the campaign started on a very slow note, and maybe you can also understand that in the sense that it's a long campaign. People will need to pace themselves. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of money. It costs a lot of money. So the campaign is going to be for 20 months, right? The longest we've had in our political history. So my hope is that 20 weeks, sorry, not 20 months. My hope is that, you know, by the time we get to November, December, we start discussing the issues. There are issues that are very, very critical to us as a country, the state of the economy. There are so many issues around the economy. There's the issue of revenue, there's the issue of debt, there's the issue of jobs, there's, you know, all kind of stuff. There's the issue of, you know, so the issue of security. What are you going to do and all of that? So we need to start hearing them, not just all these, my crowd is bigger than yours thing that we're seeing now. Yeah. We need to start talking about the issues. An electionary period is a very critical period for a country that is at an inflection point like our own. This is not just an opportunity for us to start discussing the kind of future we want to create as a country, but also to start crowdsourcing ideas. Now we're not seeing the ideas being contested and being debated and being interrogated.
Right. And that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. And let me come to you, Mahmood Jega, for the final word, because we've got about a minute or so. So if you could be reasonably brief. Do you expect, just listening to Waziri Adio there and to Kasima Febua, do you expect that 2023 will take Nigeria in a very different direction from the previous leadership?
That's what we can do, because we already have got all the major candidates fielded by their parties. We can't go outside that. We just have to make our choice within what is available. And I think the most important thing going forward is through television and newspaper interviews and also television debates to get them to commit themselves to certain definite positions on policy, like on education, you know, ask them, this ASUU strike, this insecurity issue, what will you do about fuel subsidy and issues, concrete issues like that. So let them take a position, and whoever happens to win the election, then we pin him down to the promises that he has made, and also keep contributing and remain vigilant and see how that will take the country forward. But we can't go outside the choices that we already have now.
Absolutely. And on that important note, I want to thank you, gentlemen, very much indeed for joining us today. The public affairs analyst and former presidential election spokesman for the PDP, Kasima Febwa, the journalist, policy strategist, and Arise News analyst, Waziri Adio, and Arise News analyst and former chairman of the editorial board of Daily Trust newspaper, Mahmood Jega. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.